The pre-show is live. If you're watching this on the replay, you can fast forward about 15 minutes and we will begin the live show. If you are here live, you can go to professormesser.com/live or /anywhere really. But /live will give you the details and you can participate in the chat. And I'm going to put that in there right now. Rolling. Let's do a check of these things. There's camera 1, camera 2, camera 3 with my head, camera 4 with my head, and me with the phone number. All right. That's all working. Very nice. Hello, everyone. Hello, chat room. Hello, people. Hello, everybody. We should probably start a quiz. Can I start a quiz? Yeah, let's start a quiz. Let's do one of these. Start a quiz. Start that quiz. Teacher paste. Disable names. I don't want to disable feedback necessarily. Okay. So for those of you that are following along with Socrative, you can load up the Socrative app in your mobile device or go to Socrative.com and go to the Professor Messer room. Professor Messer, PROFESSOR Could you use that in a sentence? No, I can't. Oh, you know what I need? The thing I always forget. Vocal zone. Vocal zone. And now I've got 15 minutes or so. So I did find all my cameras. I was sort of spoofing. I know where all of my cameras are all the time. I should probably change my website so that it shows. Let's see. So it shows that we are live. Where's that link? It's here somewhere. Let's see. My live study group is right now. Here to join. I've changed the link to the live link. Click here to join, not join. Join. You have to spell things properly and type things in and all of that. Caches are cleared. Off it goes. My garage door was left open. These are the emails I get. Who knows what's going on out there? Can't check it now. And how is the video going crazy? I mean, more crazy than normal, or is it something specific? Oh, pitch black. That's nice. Let's see how it looks on my side. ProfessorMesser.com/live. And let's see how we are doing with this. Left open. Oh, these are the emails I get. Oh, that looks pretty good. I mean, what's going on out there? Looks fine. Sounds okay. It sounds very loud now. Well, I like it. And how is the video going crazy? I mean, more crazy than normal? It was not there. So, okay. Looks good on my side. Let's test a few things, turn a few things on. Yep, that works. Okay. Okay. Well, these are only slightly annoying. The white thing. Oh, I've got a light in the way, don't I? Let's fix that, shall we? That's a little less bright right in your eyes. Sorry about that. That was my lights for the back thing lighting the background. There are lights in the front of me. There are lights behind me. Soon these lights will be on the top. So we'll get to do that for those pieces. All right. Well, let's see how this is looking then. Okay. Got some recording going there so I don't forget. Okay, well, we figured out those pieces. Let me make sure. Now I have a lisp because I have the vocal zone in my mouth. It certainly looks better without a big light stuck in the way, doesn't it? That is my like my bird cam. What do I call this? My controller, my video controller. That is the bird cam. Let's see, we'll have tweets and other things go out in about 2 minutes. It's kind of cold in here. Although we can't see outside, it is a beautiful day outside. We'll be in the upper 90s or the lower 90s today, Fahrenheit, because that's how we do things here. Okay, air conditioning is ramping down a little bit. Those lights, those spinning lights, those are my little Cylons. Those are a recording system that I use. It's a video recording system from Blackmagic that is recording 2 streams of video. It's recording the video stream that you are seeing, and it's recording the video stream that is on the preview. In fact, if you look in front of me, you can see the one you're seeing is to the right in front of me. And the one that is on preview is the one to the left. That's my talking head. So if I was to push one button, it would switch those. So that's why I'm recording both of those. Now I'm recording both of them because I can. Usually I just record the main stream. That's all I really need to record. In fact, I'll start a separate recording of the main stream. So I'm actually doing 2 recordings of the main stream during the study group. And of course, YouTube is storing this as well. So the reason I do the backup is in case I do want to go back and edit some part of this, I can edit in what is effectively B-roll, was effectively a separate view of what's going on. And so I can keep audio and keep everything going the way it was, but I can put other things in there. Although with editing, there's so much you can do. It really doesn't matter. All right, we're about 5 minutes. We should see some tweets and things going out. Did some tweets and things go out? Should have. Let's check the Book of Faces and see what happened there. Oh, it's the wrong browser. Over here. That's the wrong browser. Too many browsers. Let's check this browser. And it did not send it. Did it? Yes, it did. Okay, we can unpin my event from the top. Now I'll be able to see things. So that worked fine. And did the Twitter work fine? Yes, it did. 50 seconds ago. Very nice. Very nice. I like it when things work. Okay. I am so sore. This is the summertime. I'm able to get out and move more. And it has negative impacts. Pain is good, though, isn't it? Isn't that how it's supposed to work? Pretty sure. Okay. Facebook is on. Twitter's on. People should have gotten their emails now, so we should see more people show up in the chat. And before we go live, if you are watching this live on the YouTube and you're not seeing a chat, that's because the chat is all on ProfessorMesser.com. That's where you'll want to go to watch the chat. And as a programming note, next Saturday will be the premiere of Professor Messer's Security Plus study group. We'll be doing Security Plus a week from today, same time, same station. Check the calendar for more details at ProfessorMesser.com/calendar. Okay. I have taken my vocal zone. It is now gone. I have a hot beverage. How are numbers here? My TriCaster numbers look good, and all these numbers look fine. Time and dates are synced. We're good. We're so good. Do I have everything up here? Not really. I usually have my GTS learning courses here, so I can demonstrate some of those. No point in logging in now. Security Plus is the SY0401, which was updated at the end of last year. There's a bit of a delay between what I see on the chat and when you hear it. So, again, that's one of those things I really need to think about doing something with something I should be doing. So that is what that is. I think there should be a number of people who'd be interested in the Security Plus study group. Security Plus has a completely different group of people. Sometimes people are only taking the Security Plus certification. They're not even taking the A Plus or Network Plus. So that's and obviously I've just left a startup after, well, it was a startup 6.5 years ago. That was all security. That's all I did for the last 6.5 years. So might as well bring some of that to the table. Might as well do some of that. All right, we are a minute away from getting started. Might as well start my local recording here. That's done. Need to have like a list. It's like launching the shuttle. What happens at T-minus 60 seconds? Well, these things need to happen. It'd be great if I had a list of things. Oh, we got a scrub for today. We weren't able. The Inten 005 English version exams will be retired on August the 31st. We'll talk about that in a moment. And Socrative.com is where we'll be doing Q&A. There's a question up right now about how long you've been studying for the Network Plus certification. The room name is Professor Messer. Which doesn't really rhyme when I say it like that, does it? Oh, well. Let's get things started here and get things going. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the May 2015 Professor Messer Live Network Plus Study Group. This is our monthly study group where I sit down and ask you questions and you give me the answers and we see how well we do. I take these questions from the information you send me throughout the month and you get to do it live and online, and we all get to follow along at the same time, and I'll show you how to do that in just a moment. If you're watching this live on YouTube, then you can join with our live chat on Professor Messer. I don't look at the YouTube chat. In fact, it's disabled, so there is no YouTube chat. You have to go over to ProfessorMesser.com on any of the pages, but if you go to ProfessorMesser.com/live, you'll have both the video and the chat at the bottom of the screen. How convenient is that? There's also a lot going on with the Network Plus certification. This time around, there's a whole lot of things going on right now with these certifications in general. So I will be watching the chat room. You'll be asking questions of me. I'll be trying to answer those as well, and we'll go through these pieces. There is, as I mentioned, quite a few things going on. You can see here the new box here for Professor Messer's offline Network Plus training course, the N10006, which is the brand new one. I'm going to hold on just a moment. I'm going to change things around here on my side just a moment so I can see things a little bit differently. Really, that's just so I can clear my throat. There is quite a bit happening. I've got the new Network Plus offline course available. You can purchase it right now by going to ProfessorMesser.com/GetNetPlus. Of course, you can always follow what we're doing on Twitter at ProfessorMesser.com/Twitter. All the new videos for the N10006 are on ProfessorMesser.com/YouTube, or just go to freenetworkplus.com, FREE networkplus.com. You can also get vouchers, discounted vouchers. So before you take your Network Plus exam, your A Plus exam, any of your CompTIA exams, I have a 10% off voucher that you can get at ProfessorMesser.com/vouchers. You always seem to get that little thing in your throat just as you start the live stream. This is the Network Plus course, the N10006, that's available. It is a little bit different than some of the others that we've done. The offline version of this one is full 1080p, just as it's full 1080p on YouTube. I have closed captioning on all of my videos. You will find closed captioning on all of my videos on YouTube as well. They're built into this offline version, so if you're watching it with VLC or QuickTime or whatever media version you're using, you'll be able to see the closed captioning on those as well. I also have all the transcripts from all of my videos just underneath them on my website. You don't get to see that on YouTube. You have to come to ProfessorMesser.com to see the full transcript. So if you're trying to figure out a word that I said, or perhaps English is not your first language, it's very easy to go and read along with me, and you'll be able to see what's going on. The interesting part about that is that it's a human being that did this. So I've handed these videos off to a third party. They have transcribed everything. So unlike the automated transcription that you get on YouTube, that is only good half the time, it seems, especially with some of these more complex terms, this is one that is at least 99% accurate. I understand it's not 100% accurate. It's difficult to get that level of accuracy with transcripts, but it comes very close. And it's nice to be able to follow along. Most of the time, you can figure out what's going on based on those transcripts that are there. And my course notes, which are also very popular, I'll talk about those in just a bit. Those are also included with the offline version now. So you don't have to purchase them separately. They just come with everything else. So be sure to have a look at that, ProfessorMesser.com/GetNetPlus. Now, if you're following along today, you can answer questions as I'm asking them. And we'll all do this together, and we'll get to see what the results are from everybody. I'm using this service called Socrative. So you'll want to open up a new browser window, go to Socrative.com, and you can log in or connect there as a student. And you'll want to go to the room called Professor Messer, ProfessorMesser. If you're not seeing a question there right now, then you're in the wrong room. Check your room name. There's also apps that you can get for your mobile device. So if you're running a Windows device, an Android device, an iOS device, go to the appropriate type of app store for that particular device and go find the Socrative student app. There's also a teacher app there as well. Obviously, that's not what you need right now. You need the student side of that. I've already done all the work on the teacher side. I put all of these things together beforehand, and we can simply go out there. Now, if you do that, you'll be able to see a question in there right now, which is, how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification? So go to the Socrative.com and you'll see in the room Professor Messer. Just leave your screen right there, and the questions will come up. You don't have to touch it once you're in the room. Very, very useful to have that there. So there are a number of people who are in there. Let's look at my screen. In fact, you'll be able to see how long have you been studying for your Network Plus certification. And as you answer, I get to see the results of that. So you can see it's moving right now dynamically on my screen. So I get to see most of you for Network Plus less than 3 months. I think we're down now at the end of one of the semesters. We're into the summer type of learning for universities and colleges. And technical schools. So I think a lot of people are now just starting out now on Network Plus materials. So it makes sense that half of you here right now are working on this for the first 3 months. For those of you like me, it's over a year. So you 6% of you, I'm with you guys. I've been studying for one particular certification. I think I have been studying for about 18 months for that single cert. It's one that I keep putting off. I keep doing it and I keep not seeing it there, and I other things happen in my life. I don't see the end of this yet. Let me keep studying some more. Then I have to go back and read it again because I forgot from the last time. So I'm with you folks as well. If you are seeing that you are working on that, yeah, I should put in the chat room, how about one where I haven't even started studying yet? I need one of those thrown in there. That's probably not a bad idea. And for those of you that already have your Network Plus certification, I'll be providing you with a keyword today that you can send me for continuing education units. So by simply watching this, either live or you're watching the replay, you are eligible for continuing education units if that's how you plan to renew your Network Plus certification. So there is a lot going on with Network Plus right now. The new Network Plus certification is out. So the N10005 has been around for about 3 years. It was released December of 2011. It will be retired, at least the English language version of it will be retired on August the 31st. It will go away forever. Now, that doesn't mean that anything changes with your certifications. You could go in on August the 31st, take the exam and pass it. Don't really recommend that, but you could. And if you did, your certification will be good for 3 years. In fact, you could take either the 005 or the 006 right now, and you get exactly the same certification, and the certification is good for 3 years. So you're just fine there. Doesn't matter really which one you take. The newest exam, though, is the N10006. It was released in February, at the end of February, really beginning of March, so it hasn't been out for very long at all. All of my N10006 videos are available to watch on YouTube. They're available to watch on ProfessorMesser.com. And so everything is ready to go with the N10006. You could study for that one if you'd like. I usually recommend, if you are just starting your studies, to study for the latest exam. There are plenty of books available right now. I got GTS Learning had their book available on the first day. They were the ones I used their book pre-release to build all of my videos. So there's plenty of materials out there for the 006. All of my videos are available for the 006. There's a lot of materials out there. So I usually recommend getting the latest one so that you're learning the latest materials. You're learning the latest technologies. There's a lot more security in the 006. There's more of an emphasis in virtualization and software-defined networks. There's quite a bit. So there's a lot of things you should consider when you're looking at which one to go after. If you've already been studying for the 005, go ahead and take the 005. You have until the end of August. So don't readjust now. You've been studying for so long. You folks that have been studying for 9 months to a year or over a year, or even 6 to 9 months, you've already been studying the 005 materials. Go take the 005. Why would you change right now in the middle of everything? So just an idea. There's some strategies you can think about for going out and passing your Network Plus certification. Okay, let's now go to some questions. So all of you should be in the Socrative app by now. I can see that a number of you are in there. So you're going to get this question now pop up on your screen. If a single network link is disconnected and everyone on the network is somehow affected by this, which one of these topologies is most likely in use? We're going to start off with the beginnings of understanding how to architect a network. And in fact, these do come up quite a bit for you network architects out there, people that have been doing this. This is one of the questions you think about. How do we build this network? What type of topologies do we use? What are the advantages and disadvantages of using these types of topologies? Now, in this case, you have a number of options available. You have is this a peer-to-peer network? Is it a star network? Is it a bus network? Is it a client-server network? Or is it a mesh network? Maybe if I did that, you'd be able to see a little better. So you can see all of the different options are available on Socrative.com. Again, you go to Socrative.com and go to the Professor Messer room to be able to do that. In the chat room, some folks, Jess was asking, since 006 has more security, is there more of an overlap with Security Plus? And there is a little bit more of an overlap. It is in no way a replacement for Security Plus. It isn't pulling in a lot of information from Security Plus, but some of the key pieces have been improved in this. The 005 version had security in there already. So this is just a little more security, which makes sense since security is certainly more of an emphasis these days for the networks that we use. Everybody has to think of security. The folks managing the servers, the folks that are handling data center management, the people that are doing databases, the product developers and programmers have to think about security, and network people also have to think about security as well. So all of the things that you had in the 005 with TACACS and understanding how to do radius authentications and understanding all of the pieces around authentication methods for different operating systems. Those are also in the 006, and they've added a few little things. In fact, the 006 added a lot of little things throughout the entire exam. It really was not a cut and paste. It was paste it in and then add some additional things into the middle of this. They really did go through the exam and change almost every aspect of it in a little bit, some places more than others. Let's see how we did with this. You can see that, gosh, 77% of you said this was the bus topology that would have affected you. Peer-to-peer, 9%, star 6%. All the others are single digits. Nobody really bit on this one, but 76% said bus, but this means that about 24% of you said something else. So maybe the 24% of you might have been right on this one. But how would we know? We need to find out. Well, let's look at some of these different topology types and look at the advantages and disadvantages. A peer-to-peer network is really describing the communication method. It is not describing the way the network is physically plugged in. So if we're thinking about the way that a peer-to-peer network and disconnecting part of a peer-to-peer network really has no effect on anything else that's going on, you've effectively turned off one machine because the peer-to-peer is not something down at the network place, so that wouldn't be the right answer either. What about client-server? Well, similar scenario. Client-server is a way these devices are communicating. It's not necessarily how the network is architected. It's not a physical network design. I threw those particular options in there for peer-to-peer and for client-server to fill some space. So unfortunately, if you answered A, if you answered D, those would not be the correct answers. So let's go to something that's more of a topology then. Would it be a star topology? Something like this. Well, as you can see in a star topology, I don't have a way to highlight it on this screen, but if you disconnect any one of these links, it's not going to affect anyone else on the network. It's really only going to affect the one person or group of people that are connected to that arm of the star. So in this case, not everyone on the network would be affected by that particular piece of it. There should be also another type of mesh. Is it a mesh network? Mesh networks are really nice because they are, by definition, many different devices connecting to many other devices simultaneously. So there's a lot of redundancy built into mesh networks. There's a lot of resiliency, which means if you lose part of a mesh network, ideally you should not be losing a lot of connectivity here. And you certainly would not be losing it to everybody on the network. They would not all be connected in this way either. The real answer here is the bus network. A bus network is the one where there is literally one cable down the middle of the room, if you want to think of it this way. Usually the cable is one that is winding around different floors and different parts of a building. And if you disconnect any part of this bus network, you're effectively bringing it down, because the ends of these bus networks have terminators so that the signal is not going to bounce all over the place. But if you disconnect it, there's no termination, and the signal is now affecting everyone. Everybody in the network loses some type of connectivity. You're certainly splitting the network into different pieces. There's a real challenge with any of that. Some folks said, well, gosh, wouldn't it be, let's go back to this, wouldn't it be the client server then? Because that would be the one that client server, or even peer-to-peer. Client server is devices connecting to each other. But client server is a way of communicating, dealing with the way the protocols are talking back and forth over the network. It's not referring to a topology type where you're unplugging a cable. So that's why it would not be that particular piece. So if we review, indeed, all you folks that said it was the bus configuration with a letter C, you 74% of you got that one absolutely correct. Very nice. Very well done. So let's do another question. Wasn't that fun? Don't you like doing these? This is great. I love the Socrative so that we can go through and work with these. And you're going to see a new one pop up on your screen because I have a question for you that says, which of these best describes the process of grouping multiple routes into a single routing entry? Now, if you're studying for your N10006, I believe this is a 006 specific question. I don't believe this was in the 005. Trying to remember. The 006 is the third iteration of Network Plus training courses that I've done. So I have to think about the 004, the 005, and the 006. And I think this is a new one. We'll have a number of options available for you. Don't answer in the chat room. Answer A is redistribution, B is dynamic, C is aggregation, D is CIDR, and E is EGP. So which of these would best describe the process of grouping multiple routes into a single routing entry? Simply go out to Socrative.com. You can go to the room name Professor Messer, which I have written there. For those of you trying to figure out how does he spell his name again, that's how you would do it. This idea of routing, in fact, there's a bit more of an emphasis in routing in the 006. There's a bit more of an emphasis in everything, it seems, on the 006 exam. So routing is an important one. And there's a section within the exam that talks about routing tables and next hop entries and how routers determine how they get from one place to another. And this is one of the questions from there to be able to do that. So how can I be able to do this? What is the way to make this happen? And this is how I would make this happen. This is one of the methods. Which of these would best describe that? And again, no mentioning it in the chat room. Let's see how we did. So if we've got these pieces here, we'll see how we're answering this so far. So we've got, it's all over the place. We've got double digits for redistribution, dynamic, aggregation, CIDR, and EGP, although 53% of you is certainly the ones that have said aggregation. So does that happen to be it? What does it happen to be? So we've got a number of things to look at. Now, this is a very good example, and this just happened in the chat room. This is a very good example of how in networking especially, there are different ways to describe the same type of implementation. Somebody in the chat room said, wait, I thought it was this. And in fact, they were sort of right, except that's not one of the options available. And you'll see this on the exam as it'll give you an option, but the key in this particular question, you can't really see it because my big head's in the way, but which of these best describes? Best describes is what we're looking for. And in fact, one of the most accurate definitions you'll get for this is something called route aggregation. But this is also called route summarization. It's also called prefix aggregation. You'll hear it referred to in many different ways. So depending on what router you are using or what firewall you're using, what layer 3 device you're using, it might be called something different. So you need to know all of these terms because this might be presented to you without aggregation on the screen. It might be summarization, which would be exactly the same thing. It's the same piece of it. We really designed this summarization or aggregation of routes so that instead of having 10 different routing entries in a router, you have a single routing entry. This is one of the challenges you have when you're managing a routed network is your routers can only handle a certain number of routes. There is a limit to the number of routes you can have in a router. And those routes themselves, the table lookup for those is something that has to occur for every new session going through the router. So you would have to look up the route. Well, if you have a fewer number of routes, there's a fewer number of lookups that have to take place. Ideally, the router is going to be a bit faster. Now, it depends on the model of your router and how it works. There's a lot of technology in the back end, and we can have a very long conversation about network processors and how they would work. That was what I've been doing in my life for the past few years. So we can talk about some of those technologies, but we're talking at a very high level here about how this works. You can see these routing summarizations need blocks of routes to be able to do this. And the way that you would create blocks of routes is through CIDR block notation. So your routing protocols have to be able to support CIDR block notation, although you could even have it if you're doing static routing. Obviously, static routing supports CIDR block notation, so some static routing would work here as well. This is pretty useful to be able to do this. Now, let's say you have a bunch of routes. So here's a bunch of routes: 192.168.98.0, 99, 100, 101, 102, and 105. And what I did was take all of these routes and I simply wrote them out in binary. So this is the easiest way if you're trying to summarize or figure out at what point you can summarize a route. This is the way you do it. So you write down 192.168.98.0. All four of those octets, just write them out in binary. Now, if you can't remember how to do the binary part, fortunately, your Network Plus video series that I have out there has the binary math video you can watch. So you can summarize yourself, remember how to do the binary. You should be able to calculate the binary very quickly for these numbers and simply create a chart. Put all of the routes in a chart, all in binary. Now, as you can see, when you do that, a lot of these routes at some point are identical binary. In fact, there's the line you would draw. Up until the fourth bit of octet 3, all of these routes are identical. So that's how you would figure out where to draw the line when you're creating a summarized route or an aggregated route. So very similar to be able to do this. There is also if you do that, then pull this down and turn all of the ones that are different into zeros and then recalculate what that number happens to be. So 192.168.96.0/20, because you're using 20 of those bits through octets 1, 2, and 3. And now you have a route that effectively summarizes all of these that are on the screen. So in your router, you could say to get to 192.168.96.0, go that way. And it would, obviously with /20, go that way, and it would summarize all of those separate addresses all at the same time. Very, very useful to do that. Very, very, very useful to be able to do that piece of it on those sides of it. So that is where you really focus on the layer 3 side with trying to get more detail about route summarization, route aggregation. That's the way you do it. And if you were one of the folks that answered C, aggregation, the 51% of you would be absolutely correct. And well done, indeed, with that. Let's do another one. Let's do another question, shall we? I've got more questions here. This is also an N10006 question. So, what two planes of operation would you expect to see in an SDN or in SDN? Is how I put it there. So, you can have a look at that. What two planes of operation, no answering in the chat room, would you expect to see in SDN? Now, for those of you in the chat room, a few people are asking about some of those pieces. You've got these study groups. By the way, I'm now doing 3 study groups a month. So for those of you here last week, we did A+. We're doing Network Plus this week. And next week is the premiere of a brand new study group. The Security Plus study group is next week. So you'll see me talking all about that, a brand new study group we're doing every month. I got plenty of Saturdays, so we just slid another one right in there to be able to do the Security Plus information. Very nice. So if you've got a lot of information about the 006, you're going to see some talk about SDN. And SDN is certainly, we were having a chat in the chat room prior to the show about SDN and how people are implementing those technologies. And you're obviously seeing more information written about this in industry magazines. There's more products coming out that are supporting and being integrated into SDN. So it's a type of technology you need to know about. Notice I haven't told you what SDN is yet. That's because you need to know these things to be able to answer these questions. Stop Googling this. You should be answering this off the top of your head. This is when we really need to learn some of the latest technologies. And we're starting to see more and more companies implement at least some level of SDN. It's a technology that's in its infancy. It's still a little rough around the edges. There are still a number of things that people need to take advantage with and be able to do that. That's one of the ways that I think is important when you're looking at the 006. There's technologies there the 005 didn't even talk about because a lot of these things happen so quickly. And really just in the last 3 or 4 years, a huge increase in the interest and the implementation of SDN. So that's one of those things that is very, very useful to see. Let's see how we answered with that one. What planes of operation would you expect to see in SDN? You had the control plane, the routing plane, the switching plane, the data plane, or the application plane. I guess I never really said that earlier, but those are the ones you need to choose from. In fact, I'm looking for 2 of them. So you would be looking at two different options for this. And let's see how we did. Obviously, the percentages here aren't going to be exact percentages because I'm not really aggregating this into separating two of them out. But 14% said control plane, 25% said routing plane, 29% said switching plane, 20% said data plane, and 12% said application plane. So there's quite a bit to choose from along those lines. And you can see the ones that we had the top two. I guess we could choose those to say these are in the lead with 24% the routing plane and with 29% the switching plane. So you've got a number of things associated with SDN and how it operates. And for SDN, I'm looking at my notes here. SDN is where I don't even think I have the slides on my machine for the SDN piece. So let me show you what I have down for SDN. And I was working a lot with SDN over the last number of years, and I am finding more people. I think I see it mostly really in service providers. They are the ones that are rolling out the SDN technologies now, probably at its most common level. And that's where I think we'll see the biggest number of implementations of those happen right now is in that piece. I'm just going to bring onto my screen the SDN so you could see it. Software-defined networking. That's what SDN stands for. There are two planes of operations in an SDN. There's the control plane and a data plane. So there's the answer right off. If you were trying to figure out which one of these is correct on my screen, it's a control plane, it's a data plane. What we're effectively doing is taking everything that's normally inside one single device and we're separating out those software functions into two planes of existence. A lot of devices these days, at least inside the box itself, have already started doing this. If you look at a lot of the new firewalls and a lot of the new routers and switches that are out there, there is separate electronics and technologies inside of it where all of the data flow is. That's your data plane. And there's a completely separate bit. In fact, often it's a completely separate set of cards and technologies and hardware itself that is the control plane where you're managing the device and the software that manages the device and logs everything, and you configure the device in the control plane. And so these two things are separate. So whatever's happening on the data plane has no impact on the control plane. Whatever's happening on the control plane has no impact on the data plane. And since this is all software that makes the determination on how things work, you can even think about extrapolating it further, taking those out of the device, even if you wanted to, and managing the software that controls those things separately from the device that's actually doing it. Amazing technology. And it's a non-trivial thing to make this happen as well. This is something where you can now program the device, and of course your configuration of the device has nothing to do with how that device is forwarding information, whether it's a switch or a router or firewall or anything else. You can make changes dynamically because you've separated out the management of the device from the functionality of the device. And so there's a lot of scripting. We were talking about Python in the chat room earlier. There's a lot of scripting you can do, a lot of automation. And as you can think about virtualization, this fits perfectly. Think about deploying a new server. Maybe you even have this set up automatically. Let's look from a data center large service provider perspective. It is now tax time, and they have software that handles tax information. And let's say that during that, in the United States, the April timeframe is very busy for taxes. Now they need more capacity, but they have a virtualized environment with plenty of capacity. They click one button or even have this automated that says when a server, let's say a database server gets very busy, deploy a new one automatically. The new one is deployed, and using automated scripting, you have firewall rules that are deployed to that device. You have configuration rules that are deployed to that device. All of this happens automatically. It now adds itself to a cluster, so it's now receiving exactly the same data as the others. There's resiliency involved. Really an amazing set of technologies that requires a lot of work on the backside to get these scripts running and get everything working properly. But boy, it is very agile in how you can deploy and set up and get things running very quickly. Managed all from one place because you now don't have to go to the device to manage it. You can manage those in one single pane of glass, if you want to think of it that way. It's now configured without any type of human intervention. The example I gave you was a good example of that. And ideally, the SDN is something that's very open. You could download SDN software right now, load it into your lab, and start working with SDN type software implementations. There's a number of different ones out there to choose from. So the two planes of operation that you would see in SDN, if we were to look back at how we did, here it is. We would look at the control plane A and the data plane B. So in this case, the two that had the most number of answers, the routing plane, the switching plane, those would not be correct. It would really be the control plane and the data plane. Application plane, not correct either. So if you answered A and you answered D, control and data, which ones did I choose again? Control and data. You would get those absolutely correct with those. It is one of those things that these new technologies, it's amazing what we're doing with these things. And if you're studying for your 006 exam, you're finding all of these things in the 006 pieces. Now, the SDN piece is one that is just one of the types of new technologies you need to know. But I've also spent a lot of time putting together all of the course notes from my videos that I think might be important for this to be able to look at as well. This is one where when I start looking at the way these things are configured, you have to know a lot of individual pieces of information to be able to get through your Network Plus exam. I've taken all the course notes that I think are important for you to memorize and stick in your head, at least the ones that seem to be a little more difficult to understand, and I put them into my course notes. So I've got a PDF file that has all this information that I've just put online and available. I've taken all these details directly from my videos, and now they're in here, and you're able to go through these and use these just before you're walking into your exam. Think of this as your last step in being able to understand what you need to know prior to walking in. This is something that also should be used with the videos, with the books you buy. Nothing should be used as a single source of study materials. You should get as many as you can. And I've made these available for only $10. You can find more about it on ProfessorMesser.com/N10006 course notes with a bunch of hyphens in there. I really didn't make that very easy, did I? Go to the Professor Messer website. There are menus right at the top for Network Plus, and the course notes are listed right there in the menus. That should make it at least a little bit easier. And what's nice also about this, it's a digital product. The instant you buy it, you can download it. It's not a protected product, so you can put it on all of your devices to be able to use. It's something that no matter where you are, if you're on a mobile device, your laptop, you're sitting at home, you should be able to pull this up on all of these devices wherever you happen to be. So that's just something to consider. It also goes directly back to keeping the ProfessorMesser.com website running. And I want to thank everyone for already looking at and buying the N1006 study guide. Thank you so much for supporting what we do here. And could not thank you enough. There's a lot there in the study guide. And I think some of the comments I've even gotten today says, why don't you put some other stuff in there? I've got some other comments and other topics I should add to that. So that's another nice part about this, is that the study guide is not a static piece of information. It's something that is always going to be updated and new. So I'm always going to be adding to it. So that's a nice part about this as well. It's not just something that's drawn and it's done. It is a dynamic document. It's always being updated. Let's go back to the questions and see how we're doing. Let's do another one. Here's one. Let me click my next on this side so I can follow along with you as well. Which of these utilities would be the best choice for displaying the active connections to your computer? Which one of these would be the best choice for displaying the active connections to your computer? And I have a number of choices available to you. Again, no talking in the chat room. You've got NetStat, NetFlow, NBTstat, IPconfig, and PathPing. And one of the things you have to know on the Network Plus exam is how to use some of these utilities at the command line, and you need to understand when you would use these utilities at the command line. So that's where I think that really comes into play, is you need to be able to use these. In fact, the study guide we were just looking at has a list of all of these commands and how you would use them and some of the more important flags you need to know with these pieces. So what would it be to be able to do this? Yeah, so some of you in the chat room are kind of happy. You're finally getting a command line question in here instead of something about software-defined networking. There is one of these things where you start working with this and trying to figure out all these command lines. I think the more you do them, the more that muscle memory gets in your brain. So if you've never used any of these commands and you're trying to learn these commands from a book, I think sitting down at your computer and typing in these commands and going through them is a very good way to learn them. And in my video, you can even follow along. And indeed, yes, somebody in the chat room going, path ping, is that real? It's absolutely real. It's absolutely command line. You have to know it. And all of these are on your Network Plus exam. So no trick questions here, no trick answers. All of these will work work in Windows as well. So this in fact, most of these are not. Most of these will work in other operating systems. A number of these will work in other operating systems as well. There's one on here that probably is not a command line. So I'll put it that way, but everything else is. But path ping certainly is a command line option in there. Even if it wasn't, I should just make up things and put them in here. You should know that that's made up. When I put it in here, you should know if it's really part of a command line. Go out to Socrative.com, go to Professor Messer Room, and you'll be able to answer as well. Let's see how we did with this one. The one thing that was not a command line, although there are some command lines that use this, so I'm sort of hedging on this one, is NetFlow. NetFlow is not one you can open up a Windows command prompt and run. So not a lot of you chose that one. Most of you, 66% of you, chose NetStat. And you would be absolutely correct with NetStat there, being able to do that. There is MBTstat, which is an absolutely valid option since there is a command line for that. But unfortunately, that is not the one that's going to display the active connections to your computer, at least not all of the active connections to your computer. So that's one of those things that is important to remember the difference as well. There's also ipconfig, which shows you IP information, but it doesn't display anything about active connections to your computer. And pathping, the one that most people are wondering, what in the world is that? It has a very specific use case. It's not one that you would use very often. In fact, I find it to be one where you have to have a lot of patience because it does a lot of tests across a network, and it can sit there for 5 minutes before returning an answer. It'll just sit there and sit there. Well, you watch my video on the command line for Network Plus, and you'll see some of the results from that particular piece of it. There is a lot, though, that said NetStat. 65% of you said NetStat. And in this particular case, you would be absolutely correct. NetStat is the right answer here. NetStat is something you use in both Windows, in Linux, in Mac OS. It's a great utility for displaying a lot of information about what's happening right now going in and out of your device. What ports are available and listening on your device, who's trying to connect to those particular ports on your device, what devices are you communicating with outside of your computer. NetStat-A will show all of those active connections that are on your device right now. You can even show what binaries are associated with the people connecting. So if you see people coming in on a port number and you're wondering, what binary? That's more of a Windows flag, but what binary is being used to provide that? And that's exactly where it is with that piece. And NetStat-in might go a little bit faster. If all you want is IP addresses and not the names in NetStat, that can speed things up quite a bit. So you can combine these two. You could do a NetStat-in and get a lot more information, -A-in, to be able to do that. So a great little utility, has a lot of functionality. In fact, whenever I'm trying to do something on my server, I'm trying to figure out what's the best way to look at that information. There's probably going to be a NetStat flag that's able to turn on that visibility to let me see it. And you can combine a lot of those pieces in here to be able to make that happen as well. Yeah, a lot of people are mentioning in the chat room their favorite utilities. Somebody mentioned MTR. There's a Windows version of MTR called WinMTR that is built. In my machine, I use MTR all the time to be able to work and be able to see things. That's not on the Network Plus exam, but it is a very useful utility. You could, in fact, I'll show you MTR right now since I like it too. MTR, I'll do an MTR to 8888. 8.8.8.8 is obviously the Google DNS server, and it kind of gives this full screen trace route, if you will. Full screen trace route, and it keeps sending a packet every second to see how well those packets are getting through. and you can see the path that they're all taking, and you can see the information associated with those pieces. So a great little utility to make that happen. In this case, NetStat, obviously, if you answered A, the 64%, you would have got that absolutely correct there. Very useful to have that there. And I think that's a good utility to know. And the more you use it, the more you'll find little interesting things you can do with it as well. We're moving right along now. Let's do another question I've got for you. The question is about cabling. What is the minimum category of cable that can support 10 gigabit per second Ethernet to 100 meters? There's some very specific things there. You have to know. Minimum category of cable needs to support 10 gigabit. It needs to go 100 meters. So you have to think about what all the different options are for your Network Plus cable certification chart. Have that in the back of your head. That's one that's on my study guide, because that's one that comes up quite a lot. In fact, this comes up a lot when you're trying to put a network together. You've got two buildings. They are 400 meters apart. You need to run data at a certain speed. What do you put in that link? This happens all the time. This is what you're going to do constantly. The options I have for you on this one are Category 5, Category 5E, Category 6, Category 6A, Category 7, Category 7A. There's a lot of options available there to be able to use those. A lot of different things. There's obviously a lot of different categories of cable that you have to think about. Go out to Socrative.com, go to the Professor Messer room, and you'll be able to do that as well. There's quite a bit that you can do with those pieces. Chat rooms there, we're still talking about utilities we like. I like the MTR and Wireshark as well. I used to work for a protocol analysis company for many, many, many years. So protocol analysis is in my blood. Looking at packets is a huge part of what I want to do there. There is quite a bit along these lines with utilities. I had my ISP asked me, actually I think at the time it was my website provider asked me to run an MTR to my server to see where I was losing data. I was telling them there was a problem on their network, and they had me run MTR to figure out where the problem was. And I had to prove to them first it was on their network, and MTR was a great use of that because it showed perfect data going through and being able to do that. And boy, what a great use of MTR, because I was able to show them it's this router on your network that's actually causing my problem. Very, very useful to be able to do that. So the minimum category of cable that can support 10 gig Ethernet to 100 meters. What would that be? Well, let's see how we've done with this one. We'll click the How Do We Do button here. Wow, we're all over the place. We've got Category 5, Category 5E, Category 6, 6A, and then nobody answered anything. 3% and 2% for Category 7. What if it was one of those? But we've got almost a tie here between 6 and 6A. We've got even large double digits of 5E and Category 5. So we're all over the place with this one. So what could it be? Well, we'll just look at, let's just go straight to the chart with being able to see this. The chart here shows you very clearly what's able to work here in these cases. The ones you need to know about, especially with 10 gig, you don't get up to the 10 gig speeds until you hit Category 6. But with Category 6, there are two different standards within Category 6. There's a Category 6 and a Category 6 augmented. That's what the A is for. And the difference from a 10 gig perspective is the distance that you're able to go. You can go from about 37 to 55 meters on a perfectly run Category 6 network. But if you need to go the full 100 meters, you're going to need Category 6A cabling. There were a number of improvements to 6A. It moved the wires farther apart from each other to prevent more of the crosstalk. There's a lot there. So if we go back and look at all of you that answered Category 6A, the 30% of you that answered D got that one absolutely correct. And for those of you that are watching this for your continuing education units, your secret code word that you will need to send to me is Category 6A. You'll need to go to professormesser.com. At the very top of the page is a Contact Us link. Put your name and put the word Category 6A in there, and you can put anything else you'd like. I get to read all of these personally and reply to them personally, so feel free to put anything you'd like in there to me, and I'll send you back a notice that says here's a digital certification that you were actually here, and you can get there. Get your 1 hour of credit on the CEU for your Network Plus. So a nice thing to have if you're going through this. This is a good chart to know, by the way. If you're planning for your Network Plus certification, it's a good chart to know. If you're networking, it's a good chart to know. This is one of those things where people look at what you have to memorize for the Network Plus exam and say, why am I memorizing a bunch of cable categories and links? Well, because you end up using them every day. This is a very good example of things that you would use every day to be able to make that happen. So quite a bit there to be able to work with. There is no Category 6E. There is Category 5E, but no Category 6E. Category 6 was 6 and 6A. So that's one of those that drives you a little crazy sometimes, trying to keep everything straight in your mind and making all these things happen. Let's do another question like this one. What is an ad hoc network? Ad hoc network. So this is one that you're going to run into. Certainly, if you do some networking, being able to work with an ad hoc network, your options are, is this devices communicating through an access point? Is it redundant network connections? Is it wireless devices communicating directly with each other? Is it a bridge between a wired and a wireless network? Or is it a high-speed wired network connection? An ad hoc network is one of these. I can't even say it. An ad hoc network is one of these, and being able to work with it. So we need to think about what that might be. If you think you know, don't answer in the chat room. You need to answer on Socrative.com. Pop open a new browser and be able to go to the Professor Messer room and answer in there for those pieces. There is, when you start getting into networking, so many different ways to network and so many different technologies and architectures that you can build. And ad hoc is an important one to know about. This is something that we're using more of these days, it seems. I'm seeing more instances on where this can be useful and have it there. So you'll need to answer whether it's communicating through an access point, whether it's a redundant network connection, a wireless device communicating directly with each other, a bridge between a wired and a wireless network, or is it a high-speed wired network connection? It's got to be one of those, right? Well, let's see how we did. Let's click the How'd We Do button and see what happened. Well, we've got one that's really jumps out. I guess wireless devices communicating directly with each other got 66%, but we got 18% of devices communicating through an access point, and we got 16% of a bridge between a wired and a wireless network. Nobody has said so far redundant network connections, and very few people have said a high-speed wired network connection. So what is this ad hoc thing that I'm talking about? Ad hoc networking is where you may not have an access point available, or you may not want to communicate through an access point. You just want to communicate directly to another wireless device. We're seeing this more and more with our mobile devices. So you're meeting someone in a meeting and just sending them information over an ad hoc wireless connection. A lot of the applications these days are building ad hoc connections just so they can communicate to another device in this way. There is no access point involved. It's one device communicating to another device over a wireless network, and you're done. That's it. That's all there is to an ad hoc network. When you're communicating through an access point, we refer to that in the wireless world as an infrastructure communication. You're talking to this infrastructure device, this access point, a wireless router, some type of wireless device that you're all communicating to communicate to everyone else on the network. Everybody's talking to the access point. Nobody's talking independently to each other. If they were talking to each other, they'd be on a completely different network and being able to be on this ad hoc network. There's a type of wireless network, one that has not caught on, but it certainly has potential, which is a meshed wireless network. We're seeing a lot of ISPs want to take advantage of this, where you have a lot of wireless already in an area. Why not have all of them communicate as one big network? And so you can walk along to be able to do that. You can go from one place to another, and you're always on the network because they're all communicating to each other and staying up to date with each other. A lot of the times when you're in a building, in a single facility, they're building their wireless network this way, in a meshed scenario, so that you'll always be on a wireless network wherever you happen to be. And I guess if you were thinking about this wireless network, this would be like a local area network communication. I don't think it would be a PAN. I don't think you could really call an ad hoc network a PAN, since it's one that is communicating out so far. You could be communicating, across a building to another device over an ad hoc network, or even further with the right antenna. So not really personal. It's one that's actually going to another device somewhere, to another, probably one that's not your personal device either. So not sure I could really call that a PAN, but it certainly gives you an idea of some of the things that you can do along those lines. And it's one of the things that whenever I start looking at wireless networking, how I want to set up and get things running, that's a great way to do it, I think. That's where I really start focusing in on some of those pieces. Well, that was good. So if we look at how we did with that one again, if we go back to that piece, let me open up the screen and have a look at these. One moment, everyone. Here we go. You can see that those of you that answered C, wireless devices communicating directly with each other, that 64% of you answered that ad hoc network absolutely correct. So good job with that one, being able to work along those pieces. It's one that you'll find comes in really handy, especially if you don't have an access point anywhere. Well, if you're one of those folks who are working towards your N10005 or your N10006, then you're certainly concerned not only with knowing the materials, but actually being able to demonstrate your knowledge of these materials in the performance-based questions that are going to be on the exam. My friends at GTS Learning have created a series of live labs that take you through a number of hands-on labs to be able to do this. And it covers a lot of those things we were really just already talking about. The NetStats of the world, being able to use a protocol analyzer, understanding virtualization and running virtual machines, configuring VPN servers, understanding network vulnerabilities, and using host-based firewalls. All of these capabilities are part of this live lab scenario. Let me give you an idea of how these live labs might work. In fact, I've got one running on my screen right now. I just started the one that is controlling VPN access with Radius. The entire lab and how it's designed is right here. There's so many different devices. This is a pretty complex lab, and you can start up each one of these by clicking the device. Here are all the servers on this side, and I can simply power them up just by clicking on them and getting them started. We'll power this one up. We'll get, let's see, here's a Windows device. We'll power that one up, a Windows 7. So I'm just powering these up as if they were sitting in my lab, except I didn't need any software. I didn't have to configure any virtualization. I didn't have to configure the network. And I didn't have to write a lab, which is already here. Exercise 1, install network policy server, Microsoft Radius. And you can go through the process of installing your own Radius server, loading in usernames and passwords, and try authenticating against it. And you can even, of course, capture packets because they include Wireshark with this to actually look at the Radius information going back and forth and understanding those pieces. If you want to learn more about these live labs, again, you can go out to professormesser.com/netlabs. By the way, it also includes 200 practice questions for the Network Plus exam, and there's special pricing there to be able to do that. There's a lot of capabilities here with this. Now, when these devices are finally up and running, I'm going to run this as HTML5, not as Java. So we'll try that again on the HTML5 side and see if it lets me do that. Can I do that already? Let's just run it as Java. Allow it and remember it. Either way works fine. That way you can even be running any browser that supports either the Java side or the HTML5 side. I should probably run an HTML5 capability in here and have you see that as well, because it looks and acts exactly the same. It doesn't matter which one you do. So now I'm on Windows Server. Here I am on a server that I can now run and have all that running. But what if I want to look at the Windows 7 piece of it? We'll click the Windows 7 piece, and now I'm connected to the Windows 7 device. And now I can run the lab pieces that are specific to the Windows 7, and it's all on my screen. I can pop this out. I can make it nice and large. I can look at, there's a Windows 8 running in here as well. I didn't have to configure all of these to get these running. Very useful to have all these pieces here. You could, of course, set your lab up yourself. Get your own Windows devices, your own servers running, and run your own Radius and get it running, or you can simply step through these pieces. Very nice to be able to have that piece there and have those available. And if you're using one of these browsers, in the chat room, they're mentioning, hey, Google Chrome doesn't even support Java anymore. HTML5 is built into this as well, and it works just the same as anything else. Have a look at the pieces of that. One nice part of this is that they're just always available. It's completely interactive. You can pop it up on so many different machines, and I've got a special price. If you go through my link, you get a discount on it. When you can go to the GTS Learning site now and buy it for more money, or you can go to professormesser.com/netlabs and get it for $99. And this is for the N10005. There's also one for the N10006. You can go to professormesser.com/GTS learning if you want to see all of their different products. Maybe you just want one to be able to do that. Let's make that part happen. And by the way, there's also a free hour that you can get. So you can try this out yourself. Maybe you don't know if you really want to buy it yet. It's available. You can try it yourself right now to make that happen. Run it for an hour, see if it makes sense or not. And then you'll be able to know, maybe I should set one up in my lab, or maybe I should invest in this and have something that's already available. And that's at professormesser.com/netlabs. I want to thank GTS Learning for their ongoing support with what we're doing here at Messer Studios. So let's go to some of these questions. Let's keep this going on the Socrative side and see how we do. So the question now, can't really see it with my big head there in the way. So how about we get rid of my head? You need to configure an open port, configure on open port. Well done. Well done, Professor. You need to configure an open port on a firewall to allow encrypted terminal communication. Which one of these ports should you enable? Do as I think, not as I write, please. Because it looks exactly the same on Socrative, to be honest. Exactly the same work. The hard work I put into the grammatical accuracy of my questions can be seen across the board, not just on that slide, but also on Socrative. Your options to allow an encrypted terminal communication are these: UDP22, TCP23, TCP443, TCP22, TCP445. This is one where we get a lot of different port numbers we have to memorize on the Network Plus exam. I think this is another one where people are just tired of memorizing things, but these are things you run into every day when you're working on a network, especially working with firewalls, networking equipment, routers, switches, and trying to determine, is information getting from point A to point B? You have to understand what port numbers are in use. And the users don't know about the port numbers. They have no idea what's happening on the wire. They're relying on you to understand. They're just saying, I'm using this encrypted terminal communication. It's not working. So what do I do? I'm being very vague here because there's a specific thing you need to know. These are multi-step questions I'm putting in here for you. You have to understand what encrypted terminal communication is. And if you know what that is, you then have to remember what the port number is for that encrypted terminal communication. So be very useful to have that particular piece of it. So we need to know what port number we should use for this. Now, if you think you know, you can go out to Socrative.com. You can go to the room name Professor Messer, and then you'd be able to answer this question yourself. We've had a number of people who have now finished their Googling and have answered the question. So let's see how we did. They have referenced their big chart of port numbers, and gosh, we're all over the place. See, you couldn't just go to Google to figure this one out because I didn't tell you what the actual protocol was called. You had to figure that piece out yourself. And so we have kind of a mixed bag here. Let's take the top three. Well, it's TCP22, 33% of you said, which is nearly a tie with TCP443. The other two digits we have here, double digits, is a TCP23, and we got TCP445. Hardly anybody, 5%, said UDP22. So which one is it? Which one of these would it be? Well, first we have to think about what encrypted terminal communication happens to be. So in this case, the only real encrypted terminal communication anybody does in the world is SSH. Now, I'm expecting your cards and letters because I know there are other ways to encrypt terminal communication, but the one we all use, and especially when we're talking about encrypted terminal communication to a server, to a router, to a switch, to a firewall, to any of your devices, is using SSH, Secure Shell. So SSH is a very useful one to have. It uses this encrypted terminal communication link over TCP port 22. So this multi-step question really requires that you understand the applications themselves. One of the very last sections of the N10006 is applications and understanding what they are and how they communicate. And this is one of those that we need to know, which is Secure Shell, TCP port 22. This is the same as if you were using Telnet, which interestingly runs on TCP port 23, but Telnet is a non-encrypted in the clear communication. So that becomes very useful to know about that piece of it. So let's go back to the list of folks that were here and what you answered, UDP 22, TCP 23. If you answered, there it is, TCP 22. If you were D and you were the 31% that answered D, you would be correct. Now, it would not be UDP 22 because this encrypted terminal communication runs on TCP, not UDP. So I kind of threw that UDP in to see if everybody was paying attention. TCP port 23 is Telnet, so it would not be Telnet in that case. A lot of you said TCP port 443. That is obviously encrypted, but that's web communication. That's to a web server. So you don't generally see that associated with those pieces either. But I think overall, did a pretty good job with that particular one and having it there. We've hit the top of the hour, but I have one more question I think we can cram into here. So I know a lot of you have tuned in for an hour, and I understand if you have to leave, but of course replays are available to be able to see this piece as well. But I did want to hit this one because it does go back to kind of the cabling plant of things. And we'll get this one in here as well. What kind of wiring problem looks normal on a wire map but has higher levels of next? Now this is from the troubleshooting part of the Network Plus certification. So there's in all of the CompTIA certifications, there is a troubleshooting section. And I wanted to be sure I got at least one or two troubleshooting questions in on the study group for this one. So what kind of wiring problem looks normal on a wire map, but has higher levels of next? Again, this is sort of one of these multi-step questions. You have to know what next is to be able to understand what in the world I'm talking about. Now, your options, there's only 4 here. Is it a reversed transmit and receive? Is it a T568A and T568B mismatch? Is it a split pair, or is it a rollover cable? It's got to be one of those 4, right? So you've at least got some options here. One of these things, maybe you can get rid of a couple of them because you know this isn't associated with wire maps looking the same, or it's not associated with next. You can have a look at that. Have those pieces there. So you can answer this by going out to Socrative.com and going to the Professor Messer room if you're watching this live. I realize a lot of you, I get a lot of questions after this is over. I'm waiting here in the Socrative room and nothing's happening. Well, it's because you're watching a replay. You can only do this live. Another good reason to show up live so you can go through these with all of us and answer and get the questions as we go. But you should, if you're watching the replay, at least make a note yourself, and you'll be able to tell if you get these particular ones correct. Want to be able to answer this one. Wiring problems looking normal on a wire map. So you have to know what a wire map is. You have to know what next is. I threw a couple of things in here that you have to know what they are so that you can then apply them to the troubleshooting part of this. So reverse transmit receive, T568, 568B, split pair rollover cable. It's got to be one of them, right? Has to be one. I'm going to wait till we get a couple more people answering, and then we're going to see how we do. In the chat room now, they're thinking, well, which one is it? Could it be this piece? Could it be that piece? Everyone's still talking about TCP and UDP port numbers, and now trying to figure out, how do I set this up and run through the TCP port numbers? Let's see how we did with this one. All over the place. We're all over the place with this one. 26% said reverse transmit and receive. 40% said there was a T568A and B mismatch. 20% said a split pair. 14% said rollover cable. If we go with the number 1, it would be T568A and T568B mismatch. So is it one of those? Well, in this case, the folks that had 18% of you answered split pair, and it's actually split pair. Interestingly enough, with a split pair, it looks exactly the same as a straight through cable. The wire map is identical. 1 goes to 1, 2 goes to 2, 3 goes to 3. It looks fine. If you did just a simple wire map, I wired that one perfectly, but actually you didn't. You didn't wire this one perfectly. And what you'll find is that if you were to get a cable tester, one that's actually able to measure near end crosstalk. This is the amount of crosstalk that occurs at the near end of the cable, which is different than the far end crosstalk, which is the measurement of crosstalk at the far end of the cable. That near end crosstalk will be higher on a cable where you have split the pair. And it is all about where the pair is being split. You're separating out the twists. Those twists in a cable are very important because they're effectively canceling each other out whenever they're going near something that's noisy. And it's able to interpret that on the other end and cancel out information that you're getting on one side of the cable that was not on the other side. Those twists are so important. If you were to actually look at this, I created a beautiful picture. This is gorgeous, but it does describe very well what a split pair looks like. And you can see you've got your green and white, your solid green, your orange and white, solid orange, blue and white, solid blue, brown and white, solid brown. Those are your cable colors. And you can see the cables are right here and the twists are right there. But notice that these two at the bottom, notice I'm numbering these, by the way, as the pins they would be connected to on your jack. These are not 1 through 8 because I wanted to show you the twisting that takes place. But notice that I've split my pairs on these last two. The blue pair and the brown pair, they're right next to each other. And when you're punching them down on the punch down blocks that way. And when you're doing that, notice that your white and brown ends up going to where blue should be, and the blue ends up going where the white and brown should be. You split the pair. In fact, if you did the wire map, 4, notice, goes to 4. 7 goes to 7, but it's got the wrong cable plugged into it. The pair is split. And because of that, you're going to have quite a bit of near-end crosstalk whenever you start working with this. You want to keep those pairs together. You want to keep all of your colored twists all together wherever they happen to be going. And so if you were the folks that answered C split pair, those 17% of you would be absolutely correct in this particular example. Well done with that one. I think there's a lot to go through. I'm going to also mention before we go any further with this particular study group that you've got all of these exam objectives available to you. Everything you need to know about the Network Plus certification is in the exam objectives. If I have to give you a tip of the month, it's the same one every month. Go out to professormesser.com/objectives or just search in the Google machine for CompTIA exam objectives and download the objectives for the Network Plus. Use it as a checklist so that you'll know exactly when you should take your exam. When you can start checking off everything on that list, then you're ready to go. And if there's anything you're missing, you'll need to know what to study for. They give you everything you need to know with that piece. So I need to know what you want to know next. Feel free to, I don't know if I can go in Socrative and do this, but you can certainly send me a note directly at the Contact Us link on Professor Messer and tell me what type of things are important. You'll notice whenever you register for this, I ask you, what question would you like to have answered? And I try to compile and get at least the more popular ones put into the questions that we do every month. Of course, you can find out more about my course notes. I have them for both N10005 and N10006. You can see more at professormesser.com. You can also subscribe on YouTube to see all the latest videos that I have coming out. I have Twitter is where I put information. I try to do more Twitter, and we're thinking of doing perhaps even Network Plus questions of the week or of the day. So we have more of those there available. Google Plus, I also post everything on Google Plus. So if you don't hang out on the Facebook, you don't hang out anywhere on Twitter, I also put everything out on Google Plus as well. Facebook is there as well. And don't forget about the discounted vouchers at professormesser.com/vouchers. You got 1 free hour of time if you'd like to try it out at professormesser.com/netlabs. Our thanks to GTS Learning. Well, we've come to the end of an hour plus of this month's study group. We had a lot of questions. It flew by pretty well. I want to thank everybody for attending. If you're watching us live, stick around. We're going to do live Q&A. I'm going to open up the phone lines. It's open phone lines. We don't have to talk about Network Plus. We can talk about anything, but certainly check in next month. Check the calendar, and you'll see the next time we have the study group. Next one will be in June, and we'll see you then on the Network Plus study group. Thanks for coming, everybody. We'll see you next time. There is so much going on this side. Let's see for those pieces. Yeah, well, this is not how we do it. So I would like to do a pop quiz every day for Network Plus. We are indeed talking about that. It takes a bit of commitment to do a daily pop quiz. And I don't want to do it and then end up not doing it. So I'm trying to figure out the best way to do it. Do I do it every month? Do I do it every week? Do I do it? Don't know. I just got to figure that piece out. But let me open up the phone lines. I need to call in and get this going. So if you would be very patient with me, I'm going to call this in. I have to get my numbers right, because if the numbers aren't right, none of this is going to work, is it? Beep, 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 beep. Let's see.
Thank you for calling.
You're welcome. It is this number here. Did I get it right?
Your 6-digit PIN.
I will do that. My PIN is that I think...
You are now in the host.
Yay, it worked. So if you are watching and you would like to follow along with what we're doing, you can call the number 855-785-RJ45. That number, 855-785-7545. This is also toll-free, so if you're on Skype anywhere in the world, you can call in as well, absolutely free if that's something you'd like to do. There were a number of questions that came through this month. While you guys are planning to do that, I need to pop that open and have a look at those questions. Where are they? Here we are. Because there were a lot. There were a lot of people. I usually promote this about a week before. So got a great turnout this time. Thank you so much. Yeah, I do have questions at the end of every A+ video. I'm planning to go through and doing them on the later A+. Almost all of them have it at this point, but I put them in as I have time. I want to also do some for Network Plus. I want to do them for Security Plus, that type of thing. But it does take quite a bit of time to get those questions built and put there. And I put them as I have time. You'll notice I'm all the way through almost all the 802s. We're well into it at that piece to be able to do it. To find out what the word is for the month, you've got to go through and watch the video. So it's one of those things that becomes useful. If you want to sign up for Security Plus, you can go to professormesser.com/calendar and you can sign up for the register for the Security Plus next time for that piece going. All right, let's go over, where did I put all of my pieces? Let's go to the phones and I'll bring up some of the questions in just a bit. We've got the 859 area code. Are you there, caller?
Hello. Hey.
Hi, what's your name?
Jonathan.
Hello, Jonathan. Thanks for calling. What can we do for you?
So my question is not technical, but it does revolve around IT.
Okay.
Career-wise, how do you determine when it's best for you to move on from your current company to pursue further into your career?
Boy, there's a timely question. Since I recently did exactly that, I left my current company and moved on. I was thinking about this also because I get a number of questions in my email about career moves and what do I do? How do I start the career? What do I do once I'm in it? And I've had a number of different jobs in IT through the years. I know I look so young. You wouldn't know that I've had all of these different jobs, but I've worked at very large insurance companies. I've worked at very small VARs, resellers. I've worked at extremely large enterprise software companies. I've worked at startups in the Valley. I've worked and now doing this. So there's a lot when I think about going from job to job. And I will also tell you that sometimes when I made a decision about what I should do and where I should do it, I made the wrong decision. So hopefully I can bring some of that to the conversation as well. There is so many different things to consider, but I was thinking the other day, the thing that I often think about when I'm leaving or staying with a position, it's how much I'm learning. I was reading on Reddit, somebody was mentioning that they go into work and they're the smartest ones there. And they said that's a really bad place to be because they want to be able to learn something every day. And that's when they realized I'm the guy who knew everything there was to know about everything we had in our environment. I now need to go somewhere where I'm learning from somewhere else. And I thought that was a great way to think about it. That if you were the one who now needs to branch out and learn more, then you're going to need to go somewhere where somebody knows more than you to be able to do that. And I thought that was a great way to think about it. There are, of course, so many variables here. I've been in positions that were just bad jobs. I had to travel a lot, or the people I worked with where it was not a good working environment, or there was a lot of things happening that caused those internal struggles. Those things are obvious. Those you'd know very clearly. I need to get out of here because this is not a healthy place to work. But it's when you're trying to do more with your career that's the important part. And I think with IT especially, you should be learning as much as possible all the time. If you are in operating systems and desktop management, you need to be thinking about how to learn more about the network. If you're working with networking, you need to be learning more about how to work with security or databases or whatever the next thing happens to be, SDN, if your technologies are working in that space, or virtualization, or being able to work on those pieces. it's not always going to be obvious. And I think it's going to depend a lot on you and all of those variables. When I was a young chap and just starting out in all of this, I had a lot more flexibility because I didn't have a family to worry about. I didn't have a big fat mortgage and a bunch of car payments to worry about. All the things that are part of life are suddenly appear in your front yard, and you have to take that into account when making a decision with careers. If you're early on in your career, think about where you would want to live. The sky is the limit. Go live in the UK, go live in India, go live in China and Japan. Go somewhere else if you'd like to learn what it's like, because that's really the only opportunity you're going to have. But as you're proceeding through IT, I think the best thing you can do for yourself is always be learning a new skill. And if you're really smart, you'll be learning the newest skills that are out there so that you can take that anywhere you go. If you're somebody that's learning SDN right now, in 5 years, you'll be able to take that anywhere. If you're somebody who's learning and know virtualization right now, that is the key skill that a lot of people want. Voice over IP. Being able to know the latest security technologies. Those are the latest and greatest things. It's nice to have a foundation of that you can then use wherever you happen to be. And what you'll find, not to make this an even longer explanation, but what you'll find is as you go from place to place, you'll start using all of these different things that you've learned and using them in different ways. I just left a role where I was doing a lot of security, network security. Well, I was able to use knowledge of operating systems, especially knowledge of networking. I was able to understand more about being able to deploy and use these things in large environments, and you apply all of that towards security. I think that's how it should work, and you should be thinking in your mind, where do I want to be 5 years from now? Make a plan for what that is. It's going to change because we don't know what's coming 5 years from now, but you need to have a plan. So need to know now, how do I start on that plan? How do I at least get closer to that? Hopefully that wasn't too long of an explanation, but that's my personal philosophy anyway of how to get from point A to point B.
So my big issue is where I currently work, what I do, but the network's kind of smaller, and as I grow my knowledge of IT expands, I feel like I'm not fully utilizing my knowledge where I work.
Right.
So what happened with me is I worked with one other guy, and he had a higher title than me, but he ended up leaving the company. I took over his role of a network administrator. I'm only 24, by the way.
Okay.
And I'm one of those people you would consider jack of all trades, master of none positions, and I don't want to do that and be in that position forever, because my end goal is, being a network engineer, focusing on video and voice and video.
Great.
And networking. So I could see. I like that I get the experience to put on my resume, but I can't see myself being here much longer.
But that.
I feel bad because the company I work for, if I left them, that I'm hurting them at the same time.
Well, that by the way is an absolutely natural way to think. It's an absolutely normal way to think about this as well. Here's one of the things, though, is that every company, the management of that company absolutely understands that people, especially in our line of work, will be going from place to place. There will be times when they'll have people work up to a certain level, and they're going to have to hire somebody into that position. And the the very, very harsh reality of this is, of course, that if the company you were working for was under financial problems or they were in dire straits, they would outsource you pretty darn quickly, and really they'd feel bad about it as well, but they unfortunately would be replacing you pretty quick. So in IT anyway, we don't have a lot of contracts. There's not a lot of employment requirements. And so, of course, you go from place to place. But by the way, when you make that move, because you have in your mind exactly where you want to go, when you're ready to make the move, you work with your current employer to say, I'm moving to this other place. I'm giving you 2 weeks, which is, you don't have to give someone 2 weeks. You just say, I'm giving you 2 weeks to be able to do this. And I'm going to Going to leave after this 2-week time frame or 3-week time frame or 1-week time frame. It depends on what makes sense. Get some people in. You're going to need to hire somebody. I've got documentation ready to go. And you walk out of the door with them being in a good place, or a good a place as you would have them be in the short period of time they have to react to this. The reality is that later on down the road, and it's surprising, it's so crazy how this works out, is people you worked with, from my perspective, people I worked with 20 years ago, I still know today professionally. And of course, they are in a completely different company, generally doing a completely different thing. But I'm sure glad that I kept track of them where they are through the years, because I can talk to them about questions that I have. If I need a job, I can ask, is there anything available in your organization? And I wouldn't have thought about that 20 years ago, that in that very small VAR that we were working in, that they would now be in a position where we could work together to solve a particular problem, whether it's a career problem or a technical problem. So you always hear this, is don't burn your bridges and leave things better, in a good place when you walk out the door. I think that's incredibly important, but I also think it's important that you've got an idea of where you want to go. And it's going to, for what you just said, to be able to do more voice, more video, and do more of this, you're going to have to leave. So your employer knows this, and they don't want you to go because that disrupts what's going on. But from someone who owns a company and has been running a company for a very long time, it's something that's inevitable. It's something that always is going to happen. They understand that particular piece of it. And ultimately, if they're a good employer, they're going to want you to do what's best for you, because ultimately they don't want you in that job if you're not going to be happy. I hope that makes some sense.
That clarifies a lot for me. So thank you very much.
Good luck with that, Jonathan, and let us know how it goes.
All right, we'll do.
There is so many challenges with that. When I start working with employment challenges, I'm happen to be in a role now where I'm not hiring people. I used to be in a hiring position. I used to be managing technical people. I used to be doing interviews and going through the process of determining who's best for this position and dealing with people when they walk out the door. And as that manager, I know people are going to go. They're going to leave. I try to make things as great as I can while they're here. I make sure that they got everything they need. If there's any questions or problems, you try to address those and try to get things done. But the natural progression is going to be doing that. It's just the natural way things flow. So don't worry so much about, I hate leaving. Well, we all do. And it's a change for everybody. But if you want to move up and do other things, let me think in my job. I got out of college. So count the jobs. I got out of college, which was only a few years ago. Started working at a computer company, value-added reseller. I was the guy who delivered computers. That was my first job. I moved from there to an insurance company. There's a second job. Moved from there to the protocol analysis company, folks that made the sniffer. So Network General was that third big job I had. Actually, between the insurance job, I actually moved to a VAR. Moved to a VAR. There's the third job. Then moved to the protocol analyzer company. Moved Network General. There's the fourth job. Network General was bought in by McAfee at that time, turned into Network Associates. So that was sort of a fifth job because I moved up into a management role. I left there and went to work for a third-party call center company. So more voice over IP, voice video type of thing. There's the sixth job. Went back to Network General in a corporate role. There's seven. Moved from there. Where did I go from there? Oh, from there I went to the startup. So there's 8 jobs, and I worked at the startup for 6.5 years. So I've had 8 jobs in IT, and really there's multiple ones within that with different roles and different things. And every single one of those, I had to tell somebody, I'm leaving and going to this other company. I'm leaving, I'm going to this other company. I'm leaving, I'm going to this other company. It's a big life change. But the employer knows it's going to eventually happen. You have to do what's best for you to be able to make that. I guess now it's 9. Now this is what I do. So you have to think about those things. 10 years ago, I sat down and said, I want to do this, and said, what do I need to do in 10 years to get to this point? And that's how long. It really took me 6 years to make this happen. So that's how long these things take. That's when I say you need to look out into the future and decide, what do I want to do? You at least need the goal so that you can start working there. It's going to take you. I went all around the place to finally get here. It took me a a lot of different changes, a lot of different manipulation to get to this point, but it's incredibly important. Phone lines are open. It's open phone lines. Doesn't have to be any particular topic. You're welcome to call in about anything. Let's go to the 559 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hello, is that me?
That is you. What's your name?
Okay, my name is Kriton. I'm calling you from Cyprus at the moment.
Kriton, very nice.
Okay, so I don't have a specific question. I just wanted to say hi. I subscribed a while back at your channel. I think it's pretty interesting. I'm following you. I'm trying to learn things from you.
Great.
I believe that you're really good to what you do, and all this live thing. It's like I really admire that, because I don't know. I don't YouTube a lot, but I don't know if there is any other like doing this like what you do. You know what I'm saying?
It's a little bit weird. It's a little bit unusual, and I do appreciate the kind words. Thank you.
Yeah. No. I really like it. Because you give valuable information that only in the like universities can be taught. You know what I'm saying? So
Sure.
If I really want to like learn about stuff about internet, about IT, about whatever topic you're talking about, it's really we really learn about stuff, and the way that you explain things, it's absolutely amazing. I'm a foreign person, so I understand everything you say. At least I think so. But
Right.
you're doing a really good job. So I just also wanted to say hi to everybody of your listeners or your viewers, and keep up the good work, okay, Professor?
Thank you. Thank you so much for calling, and we really do appreciate it. It's very motivating to get the kind of feedback and kind of keeps everything going.
Yeah.
So it's very important for me to hear that as well. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you also. Take care.
Thank you, you too. We built this. I mentioned earlier about working towards doing this, and we built this thing this is an experiment that kind of got out of the lab. Built it because there were people that I knew that were taking their computers to places to get them fixed, and they would come back worse than when they took them there. I'm thinking, why are these people not fixing the computer? You can easily go out to the internet and find out how to fix there's really not a lot of resources on the internet to know how to do this. Of course, they're not able to do it well because they don't have the resources they need. I found it odd that you would have to spend $1,000 to learn information when you're just getting started. You don't have that kind of scratch. So where are you supposed to learn this stuff? That was kind of the whenever you start working, if you're planning to open your own business, you need to find out where there's a gap, where there's a need, and you need to fill that need. And that was effectively what brought this on. So the 540 area code, are you there, caller? What's your name?
Hi, Professor. My name is Josh.
Hello, Josh. Thanks for calling.
Yeah, thanks for having me. Yeah, of course, first and foremost, just like the last guy, thank you so much for everything that you do.
Thank you.
Thanks to you, I was able to get my A+ certification just a few months ago.
Great.
And now I'm studying for my Network Plus.
Congratulations.
So
that's a good next step.
Thank you so much.
And I think I've said before, by the way, network and knowledge of the network will serve you well no matter what you do in IT, because it affects everything. So I think that's a good next step.
Definitely. Thank you. So, Professor, I just have two quick questions for you today. The first one kind of already caused a little stir with a couple of coworkers.
Oh, good. So you're that guy, apparently.
Yeah, I'm that guy.
Okay.
I also happen to be the guy that works in a Windows dependent environment, and I happen to be the guy that likes Macs. And
okay.
And I currently have I have quite a few machines at my house.
So I'm feeling a Hatfields and McCoys kind of problem here coming on. So
yeah. Right,
Yes.
right. I have a couple of different machines in my house, and what I've wanted to do is I've kind of wanted to take all the systems that I have and condense everything into
Sure.
one machine. And so I've been talking to a couple of friends a lot about VM machines. Taking and what I wanted to do is I wanted to take my Windows desktops and kind of convert them all to VM.
Sure.
Now, in my IT profession, I work a lot with Windows, so it's kind of something that I definitely need, and I simply like Windows. But at home, I do enjoy working with my Mac personally a lot. And so my question is can VM replace a machine necessarily, or would would you always want to have two separate machines at your leisure?
This is a problem, a challenge, I think, for everybody in IT, especially people who are working with networks and working with security. In the last role I had, I was working as a systems engineer for a company that had a next generation firewall product. This was a very advanced technology. It was very security focused. Every single one of the engineers that went around to show this technology and work on it and deploy it and implement it all used Macs. The previous jobs I've ever had, especially in a large enterprise, and even in the one that I was in, the next generation firewall company, the infrastructure was a Windows domain. So this is very common and becoming, I think, more common these days to have it there. What's interesting, and your point about virtual machines is absolutely applicable and probably easier for you since you have Mac OS. It is generally, in fact, it's exceptionally easier to run a Windows operating system in a VM on a Mac device than it is the other way around, because Apple doesn't license their Mac OS software to run in a virtual machine unless it's the server version. So legally speaking, you would need to do it with Mac as the client, or as the machine that's running on your desktop, and running as the clients in their virtual machines be Windows. And in fact, that's pretty much how, if you look at, I have a course that I did, was the Windows 7, configuring Windows 7 course that I did on my website. That entire course was done on a Mac. So you never see the Mac because it's a Windows course. There's domain controllers, there's separate machines. The machines are booting up and connecting to these devices and installing themselves using Pixie. There's deployment options using DISM. We're deploying from Windows Server devices to these desktop machines. It was all virtual machines running simultaneously on my desktop, running in full screen, so that on my videos, it looked like a Windows device, because it was a Windows device. It was a full-blown Windows license that I was running in a virtual machine. I could have just as easily run them as separate windows on my screen, but they run great. They're effectively exactly the same thing as a physical machine with the same networking capabilities. I can plug in my USB key and connect to that the USB on that particular virtual machine. It was so easy and simple to do. And of course, you could do this with, as I mentioned, Mac OS Server Edition. You can do it with Linux. You can run them all simultaneously on your screen. Very, very simple to do. But I will give you a warning. There is no more volatile conversation in technology than my operating system is better than your operating system. And it is, as I have found out on the internets, because I'm running, for those of you watching and are ready to send in their cards and letters, the screen that I have in front of me happens to be Mac systems. I am running Linux on this audio system that I'm running to the left of me is running an embedded Linux. Obviously, my web servers are running a version, I wouldn't say obviously, but my web servers, I have multiple redundant web servers and separate database servers are running Linux versions. And I have a lot of Windows devices in my home. And of course, the courses that I've done, I'm using Windows in a number of those as well. So you will use all of these in IT. And it turns out Windows is better at doing things than Mac is. If you look at it from an enterprise perspective, the Active Directory and the global policies you can set in Windows far surpass the capabilities that are built into Mac OS. Mac OS just works better as a desktop machine, and Linux is perhaps the best server you're going to run into. So somebody will, of course, argue with me about those particular pieces. But for what I do, I ran into problems doing the video editing and the high level of things that I needed to do. So macOS happened to be the better machine for me. I built a number of systems for my kids. Build their own computers. I buy the parts and then they stick them together and they run them and they maintain them, all running Windows. So it really just depends on what you're doing. If you know all of those, by the way, you are in a very good position in IT to be able to do whatever you would like, because now you understand the nuances of how to make all of these things happen. And by the way, if you can make a Mac talk to a Windows Active Directory environment and understand the nuances of connecting the Kerberos configurations or communicating to the Kerberos, the Active Directory directories with LDAP, there's a lot of underlying technologies that a lot of people need, and they just don't understand how to make that happen. And the more you know about these operating systems, the more you're going to be able to really leverage that in IT, I think. Hopefully that was a long answer for a rather simple question, Josh.
No worries. That was incredible. And thank you. I think just one last, just really quick question.
Sure.
Is, I was talking to my boss recently, and I just want to ask you, as far as setting realistic goals for certifications,
okay.
I hope to, within the next year, become my company's Active Directory administrator.
Great.
And my boss wanted me to start off with getting 2 certifications within 6 months. He wanted me to go ahead and finish studying for my Network Plus, and then he mentioned he wants me to look at Microsoft Server 2012.
Great.
Now, I know that's such a heavy load, but I told him yes right away, not really thinking about the possible load that could be on me. So is that a realistic goal, or should I talk to my boss and say, hey, I'm definitely going to need a little more time for this goal to be met?
I think it's a pretty realistic goal. It's not an unrealistic goal. Let me put it that way. And that's with me not knowing what goes on in your life and how much free time you have. When I have very small children, there was a lot more time that I needed to spend with my family. Now they're much bigger. They're driving. At least some of them are driving places. They're a little more autonomous. They can sort of do their own thing. So at night, I have a lot more time available, or it just depends on what your life happens to be at any particular time. I think a lot of the challenges that I have when looking at a brand new certification is the fear of the unknown. I feel like if I was to take and look at, let's take Microsoft Server 2012, that looks like to me a massive certification undertaking. But the reality is, if you go out, it's a book. If you look at the book's not in multiple volumes. It's a single book. If you look at the exam objectives, there's very specific exam objectives. I feel in my head, I feel it's a fear of the unknown that's keeping me from really understanding what I'm going to walk into. But when you start working with Server 12, you sit down, you type, you run through the labs. You're like, oh, that's how that works? Okay, I got it. Now we go to the next thing. It will take some effort for you to finish up Network Plus and get Microsoft done in 6 months. But if you're able to study every day and go through labs and you have all the right materials available and your employer is willing to support you to be able to do these things, that's powerful. So that is a great opportunity. And I don't think you were wrong for immediately saying, oh, yes, especially if they're planning to pay for it. That's fantastic. Yes, I'll absolutely get certified along those lines so I can do that. And Server 2012 is great. The Active Directory knowledge alone is valuable. You will run into Active Directory regardless of what operating systems you're going to be running and regardless of what networks you run into or what organizations you go to in the future, because everybody's running Active Directory. In the years and years that I've been going from place to place, I have been to some of the largest networks in the world and to some of the biggest data centers in the world. And all of them were running Active Directory except for one. It was a small startup in Atlanta that was not running Active Directory, but they were planning to implement it. So I guess I can really not even call that a caveat. They were working on putting it in because they know it's a well-established, well-built way of organizing what resources you have out there and ultimately providing access to those resources across the network. So I think that's a great place to go. And if you've got the support of your employer, your employer often will make resources available to you. Find a good 2012 video course, find a good book for 2012, and sit down, load it up on a machine, start playing around with it, and you realize, well, this wasn't as hard as I thought it was going to be, because that's how it always is. Quite honestly, it's always harder in your head than it ever turns out to be when you start typing into the screen and figuring out those pieces. So I think that's very exciting, Josh.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Professor.
Good luck with that. Let us know how it goes. I want to hear what happens in 6 months. So I'm putting you on the spot.
All right, definitely. That sounds good. Thank you very much, Professor, for everything.
Thanks for calling. Isn't that fun, though? I think learning something new, especially something you know you're going to use throughout your career, is just valuable stuff to be able to have that there. We have a couple of these folks are either in the same room or it must be a Skype thing because they're coming in on the 702 area code. We'll go to one of those. The caller, you'll hear a beep. What's your name, caller?
Hello, Professor. My name is Manuel.
Hello. How are you? Thanks for calling. What can we answer for you today?
Well, I was wondering if you can help me with some career advice, let's say, because you're a person which has a lot of experience in this field.
Seems to be the topic of the day. Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, I'm currently into the physical security field of operation. I'm doing intruder alarms, CCTV, fire alarms, and all this kind of stuff. And
okay.
Now I start taking over some IT parts of my job, and I was figuring out maybe it will be time to move over.
And in fact, one of the things you've undoubtedly seen is in both of those particular verticals for fire alarms, closed caption television, video security, it's becoming more and more and more networked. In fact, practically it's all networked now. It's all video over IP. You have to know IP networking. I just had someone set up a video network, a video and voice over IP communication in my home, and they knew nothing about networking. And I was trying to explain to them, no, you just connect these in. We'll do the IP addressing around these ranges. In fact, the video controller I was using had a built-in switch. There were like 6 interfaces in the back. And I said, why are you using my switch? Why don't you just plug directly into the back of your video recorder? And he goes, I don't know what those ports do. I have no idea. So now would be a great time to learn about networking and to get into that piece. Is there a particular area or a particular type of technology you're most interested in?
Well, I'm also passionate about hardware part, since I like this stuff, and I also the guy that all my friends are calling for, computer problems and network problems and all this kind of stuff. And I now started to learn for the A+ certification.
Great.
Thanks to you also. And I'm trying to validate this knowledge that I have. Another question that I have for you would be, do you think a person which has, experience and certification will have the same chances for a job like a person that has a university degree?
I think that this is another common question, and it's one that unfortunately doesn't have a direct answer. The answer is that it depends. A lot of people, and it's absolutely common to think this way, want to in some way equivocate or look similarly at a certification as they do experience, or look at a formal knowledge, a formal education and certification as experience. But the reality is those are so very different things. and they are evaluated in different ways depending on what employer you're going to go to. Some people will say that experience is the number one thing that you need. And certainly experience is a very valuable thing to have. But not all employers, I would say many employers, but not all of them are solely looking for experience. I think that you need a little bit of everything. You need to have a formal education. You need some certifications to prove that you know the technical aspect of the things that you're getting into. And if you have some experience, it's nice to have those things as well. But I don't think that you could take a certain number of formal educations and certifications and somehow make them equal in weight to a particular type of experience, because they're so different in what those things are. You need not just those things, but if you really wanted to do this right, you would also need relationships. You need to know people. A lot of people use LinkedIn, or what I recommend is going to a local user group of some kind, whether it's a VMware or a Cisco or a Microsoft. Find your local technology user group and go to a meeting. Meet the people who are there, because the people who are there are from your local companies, your hospitals, your universities. They're the people that are doing those jobs already. And now you're able to introduce yourself to them and say, oh, where do you work? What do you do? What are you looking for these days? If you were going to hire somebody to do this, what do you look to see in those people? And have them tell you, well, I need somebody that has this level of experience, or they've gone through these classes. And you also get to ask them, what if I applied for that, but I had no experience? How do you think that would work in your organization? And you can get some of that feedback from them, because every company is different. And sometimes it's all about what they want to pay you. Here's the thing. If you have less experience, they don't have to pay you so much. Some companies are very happy putting somebody in an entry-level position and training them up, because they know they can get your body in there for less than somebody who's more experienced, but they're also going to give you the experience you need to either move up in that organization or go somewhere else. So sometimes experience might actually work against you, although I would imagine that's a kind of a rare occasion to think of it that way. But I would recommend you consider them as separate entities and work towards getting as many of those things as you can to have the best chance possible.
Okay, Professor. Thank you a lot.
Thanks for calling. Good luck. I want to know about your job hunt and how that's going. It's always a challenge to figure out those pieces. And I've been to many user group meetings. And a lot of the things that I did throughout the years, I was the one presenting at the user group meeting. So I got to go all over the world, talk to user groups, whether it was in Germany or Japan or Australia or all over the United States and Canada, and just talk about what the latest technologies were. But I got to meet the people, and I thought it was such a great place, because you're usually in a nice big auditorium. It's usually one of the companies that's a member of the user group is sponsoring it. So you got a great place to go, and they always set up some type of meet and greet. So get there a little early. They usually have time set aside for grabbing a soda. They usually have pizza or something, sandwiches. You can talk to people, maybe join the organization, learn more about what they're doing. These relationships that you build in this industry will go very, very far. If you're not on LinkedIn, get on LinkedIn and link with the people you know, and just keep track of what they do in their life and where they're going, and find out what's exciting to them. And you never know where things would go. Someone I met, we were talking about this the other day. I was working at network. I'm sorry. I know you're there, caller on the line, so please stay there. But there's one thing kind of applies here. This story applies. I was working for Network General. I was demonstrating. I was doing pre-sale systems engineer for our products. Met somebody working in Atlanta at a sort of a pseudo government agency there, and kind of worked with them as you do. They bought some products, worked with them for a little bit, and that was that. Didn't speak with him again. And a number of years later, he sent me an email that said, I have a question about this. And I answered the question for him. Hadn't heard from him in years, but yeah, here's what's interesting about this. And if you need more information about this, and call me whatever. And we caught up with each other. And that ultimately ended up both of us going to work for this startup about 6 years ago because he was hired. He called me and said, "Hey, I was just hired by this startup, really exciting technology. Would you be interested in working here?" And I thought, yes, that would be not only working for an exciting company, but working with someone you know and that you've worked with for so many years. So we watched, you watch your kids grow up together. You get in jobs together. These things go up from way back in the day. So you never know where it's going to take you. You should work on your certifications. You should work on your education. You should work on your experience. You should also work on the people you know in the industry. Sometimes that is the most important thing. So caller, thank you for holding. Hi, what's your name?
This is Ziad from. Hello.
Hey there. I can hear you. Yes.
Sorry. This is Ziad from Amman, Jordan, Middle East.
Oh.
Actually, I'm 34 years old. I have experience in the IT field before 14 years ago.
Okay.
I working in the many companies like you, not one company, from company to another company.
Kind of how it works. Yep.
I like this field. I like this life. It's very good for me. I have a smaller question for you. I have finished multiple certification worldwide. For sure, CCNA. I finished A plus before 2 years ago.
Okay.
Sorry, 2 years ago. Sorry.
Sure.
2 years ago. My question: what you prefer? Now I have studying MCSE at one of the big training center here, MCSE 2012.
Sure.
What you prefer in the next step after I am doing the all exam of MCSE?
Well, you've
going
got
to do master or take another certification? What's your prefer? I am now working now as a network system administrator. And broadcast TV. It's a broadcast board.
Nice.
as an administrator.
Okay.
Now, what you prefer? This is my small question. Going to do master in one of computer field or IT field, or continue as a certification?
There's no right answer to this particular question, and it's one that I always turn around or I stick a mirror up and say, what do you want to do? What do you like to do? And it's kind of a question that is dependent on a number of different things. One of them, and it's something I feel very strongly about, having gone through all of these jobs throughout the years, is the thing I can probably say most strongly is you should always do what you enjoy. You should always find the technology that you find really interesting and go with that. When I first saw a protocol analyzer, I was working at the insurance company. I saw this thing. I goes, that is amazing technology. I can visually see the packets going across the network. And it was an exciting technology for me. It unlocked a lot of things in my brain. And I said, I want to work for that company. And years later, I was able to make that happen. And I think when you're able to take something you're so passionate about and work towards that level and get to that place, it makes such a difference on how much you enjoy what you're doing. And I not only enjoyed it, but my employer enjoyed that I was having fun with that kind of technology. And of course, that went into other things. I was able to move into other roles in the organization. I was able to move into network security roles. The networking piece is such a good jumping off point, and it sounds like you've got a very good core of technologies under your belt. So it really comes back to two major things. What is it you want to be able to do? What type of technologies make you excited about what we're doing in IT? And secondly, what are people looking for? You know, if you were very excited about Ethernet over coax, this would not be something a lot of people would want to hire you for. They would like to be able to have other technologies. But if you were really interested in virtualization, you're interested in doing more with the networking side of things. There are tons of network providers and sellers. People who have network technologies working for, you have a Cisco certification. Working for Cisco themselves is a great position to have as well. Maybe that's where you would like to move with this piece. So I often turn around and say, find what makes you excited about this and go down that road. But it has to be tempered with what other people are looking for, and of course, what you're able to support in the industry as well. Especially if you're at a point where you need to have a certain amount of revenue coming in to keep the house going. That's important as well. I would recommend that you do some research. Go out to the sites that have the job postings, the monster.coms, the indeed.coms or dice.coms, or whichever ones are important in your part of the world. Find out what people are looking for in that position that you're interested in that next set of roles, and find out, are they looking for this type of certification? Because if they aren't, it probably is not a good use of your time. Maybe they're looking for a different kind of certification. Or you may find out that every single one of these people wants you to be an MCSE, or they want you to have a particular Cisco certification. It's good to know that now before you start looking for that next job, so that you'll have that already in your back pocket. And I think that's really a good place to start, is find out what you like to do, and then find somebody who wants to hire people who like to do that. And that's worked pretty well for me through the years. Hopefully he's still there. He's still with me, caller? He fell asleep listening to me drone on and on about the technology. That's one of the things I've always, it seems to be, I don't know if it hasn't always been the right place at the right time for me. It's always been me making a decision. Sometimes the decision has been bad. When I moved, it seems like when I moved from one job to another, I know very quickly if it's a bad job, and I get out of it in about 9 months or so. And then I find a very good job right behind that. I seem to have been very lucky along those lines because I didn't do the legwork. I didn't work on getting the right things in place to be able to make the next move. I was only one job ahead. I needed to be thinking 2 or 3 jobs ahead. And that was one of the things that that was mentioned in this call, is that in IT, we tend to go to a lot of different jobs. Sometimes those jobs are in the same company. Sometimes we move from company to company. And with IT, and I think the world in general, the generation behind me, my parents, were in a world where you could start working for a company and you could stay there for the rest of your life and get a pension and retire from that one company. That's remarkably rare these days. In fact, in our particular industry, it's almost impossible. 6 years ago, there was no Twitter. What? Are you kidding? Change the world. There was no Facebook. Huh? No, that's it. So things move so quickly that we never know what's around the corner. We just have to plan for whatever happens to come that way. And then we go that direction for those pieces. So hopefully that's given you a little bit of insight. I'm sorry we got cut off. I think you were a Skype caller coming in, but perhaps that would help as well with those pieces. I think that's one of the biggest challenges I see, is finding the next place, and just take some planning and research and think about what you want to do with those pieces. For those of you in the chat room, I have been watching. For those, some folks have been asking about Linux. I do have some Linux videos on my site, which have been very popular videos. Why am I not doing more Linux videos? You ask strongly of me. And you're right. I should do more Linux videos from that perspective. I think that would be nice to have. Folks are asking about hardware as well. The in-ear monitors I'm using are Shure's. They're very inexpensive Shure's. I don't even know if I could see the model number that I have here. So while you're asking that, I'm going to go out to my Amazon and find out when I ordered this and what it was. That's how I figure out what do I need to do in life? Well, I don't know. Let's look at Amazon. That's going to tell me what I need to do in life. Sure, I have these current in-ear monitors are the Shure, very old. I bought these in 2013, the SE215CLs. 215CL. Here they are. Well, I can show it to you. Here they are. So the 215CL sound isolating earphones with single dynamic micro driver, $100. And they've worked great for me. I don't need a high fidelity for that piece. I just need to hear myself talking. And these work very well, primarily because it's the foam that's on the end that's important for me. It kind of sticks in there, and it's in there for good. So there's a little bit of insight into the background. A lot of people have been asking about hardware, what I'm using here, because there's a lot of stuff here. Some people earlier were asking about the little Cylons I got running down here. It's my video recording system. And I think what I need to do, I have one big thing happening in the studio that's going to finish this version of the studio. The lights that I have, you can't see them, but there are two very big lights right here. I'm going to have hanging from the ceiling. And so I'm putting in a rail system that's going to allow that. So as soon as that's done, I'm going to do a video that talks about all of this stuff that I'm using, the software I'm using to make this happen, the hardware I'm using to make it happen, because somebody else might want to make a video someday. Why wouldn't you go out and do that piece? Just makes sense. Let's go back to the phones. The 919 area code. Are you there, caller? What's your name?
Jay.
Hello, Jay.
From Raleigh, North Carolina. How are you doing today?
Oh, very nice place up in Raleigh. Nice to have you calling.
Yes, thanks. Hey, I've been following you since I started taking courses at a local school here.
Great.
I got my A+ both tests. I got that certification.
Nice. Congratulations.
And I've been working on, thanks. It was really rough. I've been working on Net Plus now for about 6 months. There's been a little bit of off and on just because of life things.
Yep.
But what I struggle with, a little bit of background is I'm from the sciences and I have 2 college degrees and all that. So I'm used to dealing with things on that level.
Sure.
And when I get the bulk memorization and regurgitation, it's really just my brain doesn't compute.
It's soul crushing.
I'm much more of I mean I get ahead. I think I'm learning something, and then at the tail end last week I'm forgetting that stuff.
Right. So
I just got to keep constantly doing it, but I'm constantly forgetting, and it's just recycling like that back and forth.
It's so hard to learn that rote memorization stuff when there's no context whatsoever as to why that's even close to being important. You get in, especially Network Plus, because you have to know. Even today, we looked at port numbers. We looked at the way wires are punched down into blocks. Really, the way the numbering for wires, we have to know. You have all of these pieces dealing with routing protocols. And then you even get into the subnetting piece of it, which is an entire different math problem unto itself. But just the rote memorization with Network Plus especially seems so esoteric and waste of time. And you're right, it's hard to keep them in your head if you don't have any context. So really the only thing I can sort of recommend is try using these things and applying them. That's the other thing, because most of this Network Plus stuff you can't see. It's invisible. It's protocols or something, but some of them you can work with. I think about some of the labs I was showing earlier, but you can do this in your own with your own virtual machines. Is you can set up services on one machine and set up a firewall, and then try to access that service from a separate device, and then change the firewall to allow access in. So you're going to have to enable certain port numbers to make that happen. So maybe you set up a web server, and then you try to access that web server, and then you try to open up the right ports so that you can access the web server from somewhere else. And that's an example of at least taking one concept, which would be port numbers for a web server, and making it clear in your brain because you were just able to use that in an example or a circumstance of doing that. And
it's funny. It's funny you say that, because I have Windows Server 2012, and I set up all this stuff on it before I even took any of the courses. And the latest thing I did was set up an FTP site so that I could be somewhere else and send files back home for backup.
Perfect. And I'll bet at this point you really know which the FTP ports are that you should be configuring in your firewall, because you had to at least set up a port forward, or you had to configure a firewall to allow access in to be able to do the FTP.
Yep, and you have to know your public IP.
Right. Good example. So that's a really good example, though, of a couple of different parts of the Network Plus that you can use to kind of solidify these things in your brain. And in a number of the books, there are a number of labs that set up that you could run through and set up your own lab to make that thing happen. I showed one that it was a commercial version today, but the Live Labs is another example of doing things like that. And I think that's just another, at least it is for me, another important aspect of learning this material is I have to sit down, I have to do it, because if I don't, I'm just going to forget later on. And I even struggle with this sometimes when setting up and running cabling. I ran 2 new Ethernet drops in my studio this week, and I stripped off the end, looked at the wires, and said, okay, T568B, what are the colors again? I had to step through in my brain because I don't do cabling every day. You just don't apply that knowledge every day. And I had to really think about how I was going to put these things into the jack because I couldn't remember in my brain. I literally had just finished publishing the Network Plus course. Maybe that had something to do with it, but had to really think about how I needed to set up for T568B, which is how I wire everything. So you just have to do it over and over and over again to get it, it's really stuck in your brain, so that it's always there. I think that's the important part of it. And for me, and probably for you too, that's probably going to be the best way to go about doing it.
Yeah, people have said that I'm part of that 5% that's a kinesthetic learner.
Okay. So you really have to touch something and move it and work with it to be able to have it stick in your head.
Yeah, I seem to learn more when I'm solving a problem.
But I think
So
I often say that the way that you really learn something is when something is broken, when something breaks. I've done so many implementations of firewalls in different environments, and we'd plug it in and something wouldn't be working. Well, now we have to figure out why that's not working. Is it the switch? Is it the router? Is it the firewall configuration? Is it the VP? Is it the VLAN? What does it happen to be? And going through that process makes you more familiar with the underlying technologies and how you can plan for the next implementation. And I'm the same way. The more troubleshooting I'm doing, the more I'm learning about what's going on.
Yeah, I think with Network Plus, it would really be helpful if they broke it into 2 parts, like CompTIA A+.
I was thinking the same thing when I was doing this latest course, because I'm looking at, I had finished the A+, and had the 800 series there, and I went all the way through the Network Plus. The Network Plus is a massive exam. It is a big exam, and I would agree it probably has the same amount of content as both of the A+ exams combined. In my mind, maybe it's because I just finished doing it. It took forever to get that done, but it sure seemed that way to me.
Yeah.
So that's my recommendation.
Well, I'll do that, and I'll just keep looking at as much different sources of information as possible. I'll probably grab your study sheet, just not for 5 minutes before I go in, but just because it's another source, And that's a good one to at least test your knowledge. Do I know what the different categories are? What are the steps in the Kerberos? What are the different hashes that I need to know? They're all in that guide. So that might be a good thing to at least ping a synapse every now and then and keep those going. Yep. Okay. Well, thanks. You have a great Memorial Day weekend, and same to your listeners in the United States, anyhow.
Thanks, Jay. Same to you. Take care.
All right. Take care.
And I believe it's a bank holiday in the United Kingdom. So in a way, you get a holiday out of that one as well. Kind of helps. For those of you asking about Linux, we'll come back to that. There's no formal production schedule for the Linux videos. It's ones that I do as I have time. So I wish I could say we're going to be done with them on this day, but I'm not good at planning that. So I do have other projects that are going on right now. So that's why I can't give you an exact date and time for those pieces, but there are a number of things that are happening behind this. You don't even see them. They're happening behind the scenes. So where are they? I'm looking at them, and where are they? They're not here. They're not behind the scenes at all. Where's all the stuff that is supposed to be behind the scenes? They're there somewhere. So that's what's going on with Linux. And I know I was looking at my Linux videos the other day, and because one of the things we do is I look back at what videos have I done, how well have they been received, are people watching them? And as much as I'd like to do videos on any particular topic in the world, ultimately I have to do videos that people are going to watch, because that's where I'm able to make a living doing this. So I have to, if nobody watches them, this will be a very short endeavor indeed. But the Linux video is very, very popular. So when I see that, I think, well, I should be doing more Linux videos. And I am planning to do more. It's one of those that's a high priority for me, but it's just not a formal project that's going on. I have other formal projects, things that are more of a time constraint right now that I'm working on. And you'll see the results of those soon, I'm sure, with those pieces. So that's why whenever I mention that chat room, that's why I just don't have an exact date and time I could give you. Ginny was asking in the chat room, we were talking about all the things about, we were talking about jobs and careers and moving from place to place. And the question he asked, have I ever felt unmotivated in some point in a career changing, studying certifications, knowing what I wanted in my career? Have I ever? Absolutely. I have. It is never, everybody goes through a time when they're trying to figure it out. And there was one particular point in my career where I was in a job role. Turns out it was not for me. I wasn't enjoying it. My employer had changed. There were acquisitions that took place. I got a new boss, and I didn't understand at the time I was very young in my career, very naive in my career. I didn't understand that the way that a lot of companies get you to quit is they just become very mean to you. They don't want to fire you because then there's often the requirement of an unemployment that has to be paid. So it becomes a whole political intrigue that if they can get you to quit, it has a lot more benefits for them financially. Isn't that an awful way for the world to work? There it is. That's exactly the way it works. And it was a time where I wasn't really happy with my job. My employer wasn't happy having me there. And they just started turning the screws and making things pretty miserable. I thought, what have I done with myself? Here I am in this role. I've worked up to this point. I'm in this job. I'm not happy. I've made a horrible decision. I have a family. I'm a loser. I'm never going to be able to find another job. I mean, it just all goes downhill from there. You just start thinking miserable things about life. And I ended up, I mentioned earlier about how important it is to know people in the industry and to keep track of people and find out what they're doing. I was able to reach out to an associate that I'd worked with in a previous job and said, have you got anything going on? Because I need to find somewhere else to go. And he says, oh yeah, we got an opening and it's types of things you like to do and come right in. And it was a fun job. It was a great job. I was there during the millennium change, the year 2000 change. And it was just a good, fun place to be. What a difference. But that was a time where I was wondering, what am I going to do with my life at this point? It was probably the lowest point of my career at having to sit through and go through all that. But you also, coming out of that, by the way, you also now, in retrospect, understand what was going on and why that particular person was being so evil. Not just because they were evil, because you were, but because that's the way the business line works. That's the way the business world works when you're working along those lines. I think it's important to also look back and go, oh, that's what they were doing. That's why they were acting the way they were acting. And it has happened later on in my career that an employer started acting that way. I thought, I know exactly what this is. I've been here before. And I knew that I didn't have to feel bad about myself. That when they were complaining about how I was a loser, what they really were saying was, I really wish you would leave. And I was able to not take that personally. Those things happen all the time. It is all the time. You think that's just sort of a one-off? I hear stories about that all the time. It is so common in our industry. Not even our industry, I think in the world. It's just the way the world works. And you kind of have to be aware of it and be able to work with it and know what's happening and be able to use it as an advantage. And if you can turn that around, and I've sort of learned this on this side of the screen. When you're somebody on the internet who's putting out content, you tend to be someone that people like to send notes and messages to that have nothing to do with anything, but they just like to send you the nasty stuff. And you sort of build, anybody who's on the internet has built a bark. They are Groot. They're just got this bark around them. And they very often, that stuff just kind of bounces off. If you're ever in this position, by the way, the best thing you can ever do to someone who is talking badly about you or to you is to ignore them completely. Drives them crazy. Don't ever respond to anybody who's trying to bait you. Don't ever respond. Not even reply to them. Don't respond. Don't send them anything. They have no idea if you even read what they got sent to you. Don't ever respond to the troll, ever, 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 ever. So that's my little recommendation for all of you on the internet. That's my internet advice for you to be able to do that. What apps are on my phone? Now we're really getting to the meat of this, because now we've gone 2 hours and 15 minutes. In fact, while we were on this particular call, I was pulling up my Nest because it was getting warm in here and I needed to make it colder in here. I have automated as much of my studio as possible so I can sit here and control the environment. I can look at cameras that are outside to see what's going on in the world. I spend a lot of time on the apps on my phone. My top three, other than mail, my top three are the things I use to keep in touch with you: Twitter, Facebook, Google+, and Reddit. I think those are the top four. Those are the top things that I use my phone for. It's almost always me trying to find out what's going on with you. So I'm constantly using this to find out what's happening with you. I also have an RSS feeder on here, News Blur, News BLUR, News Blur. And that is when Google News, not Google News, what did they call their news reader? When Google Reader went away, it was third parties that were left, and I pay for News Blur to have my RSS feeds consolidated so I can read about current events. I can read about IT stories, security news, everything. I got everything in there. Stock tips. I try to, what's going on with different industries, even industries I do nothing with. I want to know what's going on I keep track of things like legal industry. Legal sometimes has quite a tie into technology. So I keep track of legal stories and keep track of just news stories in general. That's one of the things I use. Those are the main apps I use on that piece. Well, I have a date with my family. We're going to get a late lunch and plan for some other things. So I'm going to kind of wrap up the study group for this time. I want to thank everyone for joining the study group. There is so much more that is going on. As I mentioned, don't forget about the Security Plus study group. Yet another brand new study group. We've never done a Security Plus study group ever. The first one will be a week from today. If you're someone who's interested in security, or you know somebody interested in security, let them know. And we're going to do exactly the same thing. I've got questions. We're going to do answers. It's going to be great. You're going to really get a lot out of that piece of it. And we're just going to keep doing the Security Plus study groups unless nobody shows up. And then we'll probably not do very many study groups at all after that. I think we'll get somebody on there. I'm pretty good at just talking to the wall. So we'll keep doing them whether you show up or not. You're going to be sick of me at some point. I'm certain of it. But until then, next month, we're going to do another Network Plus study group. Keep checking on professormesser.com/calendar for the next time. And we'll see you then on the study group. Thanks, everyone.
We are sorry, but the show has ended.